join. So thanks to the Ada Scott crew for getting us signed up to the event. It's a fantastic festival to be celebrating Ada Lovelace, but also just women who are working in the fields of computer science and wider STEM subjects. As a wee bit of context, for those, hopefully you already know who Ada is, but if you don't, she was an English mathematician and writer who's known for her work on Charles Babbage's proposed mechanical general purpose computer, which is quite a mouthful to say, but also known as the analytical engine. And she was one of the very first people to recognize that this machine has the capacity and ability to work on challenges far bigger than just pure calculation. And then also to then follow on and publish the first algorithm intended to be used by these machines. So given all that context, she's often regarded as the very first computer programmer, which is pretty cool. Unfortunately, since the year 2000, the number of young women in Scotland taking computer science at school and college has fallen by almost 80%. So for me, this makes me sad because at a time when data, tech, and digital are playing a greater role than ever before in our lives, this means that there's more opportunities in the computer science fields and related subjects than ever before. This means that with less uptake for young women, that means they're potentially going to miss out on some of these fantastic opportunities. So for myself and Kelly today, our aim is to show you some of the exciting opportunities that computer science and then the related subjects can open up in your career. Even in perhaps our case, if it wasn't a traditional career route to follow, there's still a lot to get from these fields and some fantastic job opportunities in the future for you. So as a general kind of point about the use of the Zoom call today, we would really love to get you engaged in the chat box. So we'll have a few questions for you as we go, just to get your thoughts and views and things, maybe a little bit of input, and then we'll save some time at the end of the session for Q&A as well. It looks like it might be quite small numbers today, which can be really good, because if you've got questions for us, then we can have a chat and keep it really kind of conversational and keep it really open to dialogue. We're happy to answer the tough questions too, or at least try. So I have someone who's struggling to get into the call. Try that. Seems like we maybe got a couple of technical issues with folks who can't get in just now. Fingers crossed that they will manage shortly, and we'll maybe just kick off. So firstly, I guess to give you a little bit of an introduction to who we are, and starting with Leidos, the company we work for. At Leidos here, we're working basically to make the world safer, healthier, and more efficient by providing innovative solutions through information technology. For us, that means working in a number of different sectors. Could include logistics, so we might be facilitating construction, maintenance, and supply delivery to places as far away as the Antarctic or even in space. Also working in the energy sector, thinking about offshore and onshore assets, rigs, processing plants, and other utilities that are absolutely critical to getting energy to our homes, our schools, and our workplaces. We also work in a number of other sectors as well, so right from defence, intelligence, transport, healthcare, amongst a number of other sectors. So we're taking our use of technology and really applying them to a broad spectrum of different sectors. Me personally, I've been with Leidos for 6 years, and I'm currently working as business analyst.
And for me, I've now been with Leidos for just over 3 years, and I'm currently a senior software developer, but I started off as a technical graduate from our graduate program. So as we all get for our own sake, so we can get a good idea of like who's on the call and like what you're all about, could you pop your ages into the chat just so that we know just how broad or how what your experience is.
And also, if we've got anybody who's a parent or a teacher, somebody from education, drop us a note as well so we can see who we've got on the call with us today. just for any recent joiners, we're just getting everybody we're just getting everybody to pop a note in the chat to say ages or approximate ages is also fine. And if we've got any parents or teachers or if it's all young people on the call, just drop a note into that chat box and then we can get a feel for who we're speaking to today. And in the interim, I can see that starting to come through. Amy, just as that's starting to come through now, I will start to take us through the next slides. So we've spoken a little bit about where we work, but one of the biggest questions is, I speak about being a business analyst. What's in a name? That's my job title, but what does that actually mean day to day? For me, this can mean quite a few different things depending on the time of day of week, which project I'm working on, because I tend to wear many hats and deliver many roles. For a lot of my role, I get to work in innovation. So research and development projects is something that I get to work in, which is great. And in that case, I'm sometimes an innovation facilitator, where somebody comes along with an idea, I help them develop that idea. I can also act as an interpreter between subject matter experts, our customers, maybe some software development team folks. So it could be technical people, it could be business people, and I have to kind of interface between them. I also get to act as a decision capturer, where maybe sometimes I'm documenting some of the ideas that people are putting forward and then getting it into a visual way that people can share with others. And I also get to act as subject matter for some of my areas, which is to do with information management and data, but also getting to provide that alternative point of view in a team. So, maybe I've got a different set of experiences and contexts that I can bring. So given that different point of view. And when I'm working with these research and development projects, I often get to use data, machine learning and digital technologies. Then another aspect of my job is an information management consultant. So usually in that case, I'm working with folks from energy industry, so often engineering drawings and data. And that's all about understanding how customers work with their engineering drawings and data, and then helping them to improve their processes for how they do so. So if you imagine helping engineers find the drawings and data that they need if they're working on an asset that's been in the North Sea for 40 plus years, that's quite a lot of information to work with. And then, sometimes need to find some critical files quickly. So it's important that they can do that. And then kind of a last aspect of my role is when I'm working with data analysis. So in that case, I could be building reports or dashboards so that I can help customers understand and visualize their data, identifying, say, important files out of millions of lines of code and metadata, or helping them understand, how to best approach a problem using this information. All this kind of comes together to make me a business analyst, which has, some quite good fun aspects to it as well when you start to pull all these different strands of skills together. And sometimes I get to play with new tech, which is also pretty cool, seeing that data in action. So you might see that picture there on screen where I've got an augmented reality headset on. And you can't see it, but what I can see there is a pipeline visualization right in front of me where I can kind of reach out and click on different valves and then have information pop up that gives me some details on it. So it's really cool when you get to play with that side of tech.
I am a senior software developer, but like Christy, what does that actually mean? There's so many different things that you do in a day. So a couple of the roles I deliver are software and machine learning. So software involves writing code to do a specific task, whether it's creating a website or an app on your phone. And then actually in a previous project here at Leidos, I helped write code that also performed machine learning. So what is machine learning? You've heard, I'm sure lots of people have heard AI and ML that get flung around all the time, right? So machine learning is when you actually train the computer to do a very specific task. So for instance, recognizing the difference between a cat and a dog in different images. So what the project I was involved in was to actually train this machine learning model to recognize different objects out of video footage so that um, you could just leave hundreds and hundreds of hours of footage running and it would automatically take these images, categorize them, and it would mean that the data analysts could actually then look for trends and patterns in the data rather than sitting and having to manually click, right, that is an X, that is a Y, and talking hundreds and hundreds of hours of footage. So you can imagine just how dull that would be for them. Whereas utilizing machine learning allowed them then to do more exciting and interesting things. But a more recent development of my job has actually been a switch to the cloud and DevOps space. Now, again, cloud, what is it? You hear it all the time. Well, I like this. The cloud is everywhere and it's used for a variety of different things from storage to running websites. I like to think of it, and I think we can all think of it like many different computers that are stored in data centers. And then people like me then access those computers to build websites and other software solutions for clients, which actually brings me into the role of DevOps. So, what is DevOps? Well, the word itself is a concatenation between development and operations. So basically, once software is being created, it then needs to be set up on clients' computers. Now, that's often a lot more tricky than it first seems. And it's actually my job to make that process repeatable and reliable. Basically, so that you can just click a button and it will do the same thing every time on that machine, no problem. And that's quite a challenge. Challenge I love though. And so when you're doing this in the cloud, the process remains the same, except we're actually installing or updating software on computers that don't physically exist.
Which sounds really tricky. So kind of just now a little bit about us and what we do. We can kind of kick off more into the main topic itself. We're going to give you a couple of examples on why there's no wrong path to tech as we take you through our career journey so far. Um, so kind of what we plan to cover is a bit about our career paths, take us from early aspirations right the way through to how that's developed in education, a few twists and turns along the career path, and then finally we'll wrap up speaking a little bit more about where we are now, what's next, and how all the skills and experiences we've picked up on the way are relevant to us kind of in our current roles. Um, and hopefully you'll see there's a recurring theme right the way through that is super reliant on technology and computer science right the way through. And fingers crossed you'll have some questions for us as well as we go. So maybe just to have a little bit of a think where we kick off here around your ideas for the perfect job role and chuck some answers in the chat box for us. And also we can pick some up at the Q&A at the end as well, but maybe think about what did you want to be, what do you want to do to start off your career path, or what was the first career that you were interested in? And maybe tell us if that's changed. For me, what I thought I was going to be when I grew up was an artist or an art teacher.
And for me, I thought I was going to be a vet when I was very small. Just loved animals.
So then to take us on to firstly kicking off with my career path, and then we'll go on and Kelly can take us through hers as well. So starting pretty early on here, early career aspirations. Firstly, you think about what is it I'm interested in, and when you're quite young, that might just be whatever your passions are. Um, at a very early age, circa, I'm not going to tell you what year it was, but about 2 3/4, art was very much my passion. And you start to think about, well, what am I going to be when I grow up? But I would say at quite a young age, maybe early school, I wasn't really sure how this could translate into job because, my knowledge of careers probably wasn't very good at that age. Really, it was kind of a case of, oh, well, I'm into art, therefore maybe I'll be an artist, or maybe I'll go on to become an art teacher. Kind of limited knowledge on that front. Then as I progressed through school, my interests probably expanded quite a lot. And so did my knowledge about different careers options too. I started to think about art applied as a subject. And although it's very worth calling out that even though I didn't choose computing as a subject at school, I still had quite a lot of exposure to digital technologies. And I was really lucky that a good family friend and neighbour actually donated one of her old computers to me. So I had a computer at home that I could kind of learn a bit on and look at my own wee projects at home. So I was pretty lucky in that capacity. In terms of art applied at school, um, the first thing I probably looked at was product design. This is sort of introduced maybe about fifth year when I was studying art. And what interested me a lot about it was solving a design challenge when presented with a problem. So this I started to think about art as a functional product almost as you're solving specific design challenges. And then I became aware of mixed media art. So here I was starting to pick up some skills in illustration, Photoshop, so using a number of digital art media as well as the more traditional stuff throughout my time at secondary school. And I started to think about this idea of conveying art being a thing that can convey an idea or a feeling, but with imagery. And effectively that comes down to visual communication. And then architecture was another thing that piqued my interest. And I think this grew with my love of travel. So visiting ancient Greek ruins, modern art galleries, learning about different architects, such as Gaudi with his fairy tale architecture in Barcelona that you can see in the bottom right there. And I came to understand that architecture, in a way, was art for living and working in. And so again, it's a little bit like product design. You're solving a complex set of challenges, but using kind of creativity as part of that. And then last but not least on this page, we've got photography. What initially I was doing was working with my dad's old manual SLR camera. What I really liked about that, to say this Nikon was older than me and has probably been all over the world and up the Alps and all sorts. But I really liked its clunky mechanical features, sort of technical controls. And it's nothing like working with, a smartphone camera or a digital camera that we have, in that you only have limited shots on a film, right? So you maybe only got 28, 36 shots, and you really need to make every single one of those count because it's quite expensive to get them processed, and you don't necessarily have an unlimited supply. So you stop to think about framing the photograph. And I found that I was taking more photographs of building details and then people interacting with their environment than the typical holiday shots. So I have to ask the group, has anybody in this group used a camera with real film before? And if so, do chuck us a note in the box there, and tell us if you like the result with it. And I've seen
I remember using a real camera with film.
Yeah, it's not something, not a love of everybody, but it certainly got to feel.
Oh yeah.
And a question there, I'll pick this one up quickly, and we'll definitely touch more on this at the end. But the question there from the panel is: Do you think learning about art has helped you learn about computing? And in my case, I would say absolutely yes, from a creative thinking perspective. And I'll maybe touch more upon that at the end. So I think and you'll see as I kind of take this through, I'm quite a broad skill set type person. And I think creativity is a really, really useful partner to dealing with technical subjects. So hopefully you'll start to see that come through a wee bit as well. And I'm happy to pick that up again at the end as well. So thinking about the end of school, you start to think about, what's next, further education. Do I want to go and study at university? How do I want to take it from there? Initially, I considered art school. I thought about art and product design and architecture. And what I effectively decided to do was to focus on a course with a profession as an outcome. So what I chose to study was architecture at university. And in terms of the key skills that I picked up there, design brief. So answering the challenge of a design brief, I mentioned that kind of being aware of that at school. So, working through all aspects of a problem, finding a solution. Also engaging with multiple stakeholders. So from an architectural point of view, you could be working with your customer who, you're designing a building for, but you're also meeting the needs of government bodies, funding committees, local residents who might be impacted by, deciding to put a building down in sort of their locale. And then all the different contractors and specialists that you have to work with who then have to make said building happen, actually build it and put it together. So in doing that, you are working often within a group of people, but you still have to manage your own times. It's another really valuable skill to have. And then managing your design itself, taking your design through this the aesthetic and creative process and your different ideas, and then applying the technical knowledge, such as structural engineering, material performance, and being able to compute the performance of materials. So you're looking at environmental impacts and so on, and the technology that supports that happening. And then also research skills, because how else are you going to keep up to date with these new and innovative technologies, also the techniques and design ideas as well. And then, of course, at a practical level, you do need computer-aided design skills in order to document, develop, and then record and share design with other people. So the last two kind of are quite closely linked, but firstly, the visual communication skills. And with that one, it's really important that you understand your audience. So you could be dealing with a contractor from a technical background. So you see the image at the right of the screen there, you can see that section through the building, and it shows the build-up of information that goes into that wall and how it goes together. Your contractor is going to be interested in that sort of information, but your customer is going to be more interested in what does my building look like at the end of it, and you have to be able to communicate that information to them based on their needs. And as I said, to accompany that is your verbal communication skills and presentation skills. So you could be working on requirements gathering, you could be putting together presentations, and above all else, you need to have confidence in your research and your ideas to actually stand up and present them. And that's a really, really valuable skill to have. So following university, what were the opportunities available? For me, it was a slight unexpected turn of events. After graduating, obviously start job hunting, and I picked up some contract work quite quickly. The first was to do a bit of product design for an inventor, which was quite an interesting experience in itself. And within that, I was building 3D printed prototypes. I suspect most folks in the call will now kind of be fairly up to date and understand, what's possible with 3D printing. But this was at least 10 years ago. So this was like right when 3D printing prototypes was becoming kind of almost an accessible thing for people to work with. So that was really interesting, looking at the software that helped me build the model and then actually could 3D print it. It was like absolutely mind blowing the first time I got to do that. So then alongside that, I was also working extensions and shop fit outs, producing the building warrants and planning applications, really just trying to build up my portfolio for potential employers. However, an opportunity arose for an electrical engineering drafting role. And you might think, yeah, it's a fairly obvious link there. So, architectural drafting skills to electrical drafting skills, and then taking that CAD knowledge, communication skills, presentation skills, ability to work with, multiple different types of people in a team, and effectively trading these drawings for these types of drawings. First, I thought this was going to be a stopgap job, just while I was still looking for more opportunities in architecture. But after a number of months, I discovered that there are a lot more opportunities within the sector, energy sector, than I realised. Firstly, the workload meant I had the opportunity to take on additional staff to work with my team, which obviously was an increase in responsibility. And then I was invited to become a subject matter expert in CAD. So taking those their standard drawings and upgrading them to something that we called an intelligent drawing, effectively a series of hyperlinks that would link equipment data to reports and help engineers access the information that they need to operate the plant and just basically do their jobs more efficiently. What was really interesting about this is I started getting into changing and working with the team that were developing software systems to fundamentally change the way that people interacted with their drawings, information, their data, but changing the front end and how they accessed it. And this was really my first step towards information management and business analysis, although I didn't even know that these were job titles at the time. So it was a bit of an unexpected turn. So I'm going to hand over to Kelly now so she can kind of bring you up to date with her career path to date.
Thanks, Christy. As always think it's just fascinating hearing all your journey, as always. Yeah. So, my journey. I'm going to start off with school. So, got a question for people on the call. So, what subjects do you enjoy most at school and why? Or which subjects did you enjoy most at school and why? It's important to ask yourself, why do I like this? This is a common theme throughout my career journey. I always asked, what is it about I like? What is it about what I'm doing that I actually enjoy? And like, why am I getting so much out of it? That's what I've always asked myself each step of the way. So just pop it into the chat, if you could, that'd be great. So because, like Christy, I didn't pick computing at school. Um, I didn't think I enjoyed it. But I think that it's very worth keeping in mind that even if you think, oh, even if your friends aren't picking that subject, or say it's like computing, science, or maths, um, it's worth keeping in mind that these subjects really do open doors. So I was more keen on science and maths at school. I do wish that I had taken computing, but it hasn't held me back. But it is still worth something to consider for yourselves. Even if your friends aren't taking it, it could be quite a good journey for yourselves. So, to put things into context, I left school after my sixth year in 2009 to study physics at the University of Strathclyde. Now, I chose to go and do this. I chose to go to uni because no one in my family had gone before, and that was pretty cool for me. I wasn't really that sure what I wanted to do for a career. My guidance counselor told me, "Oh, science degrees they offer so much on graduation," and I just thought to myself, "Okay, sure, but 5 year bubble that sounds good to me," at the time. And the University of Strathclyde was within commuting distance with my parents' house. I didn't particularly want to leave home at 17, so I was like, well, that's quite good. And yeah, I could get the train. Great, fantastic. It means I don't need to move out. But really, ultimately, my decision to study physics was simply because I really loved the subject, and I know that sounds so strange for people to hear, but I really did. So that brings me to my uni days. So I was at the University of Strathclyde doing an integrated masters in physics from 2009 to 2014. So I graduated with a 2-1 specialisation in nanoscience. That's a really fancy that's a really fancy title, but really it just means that um, I was focused on very small things and doing all the science stuff. Another question for folks: does anyone know anyone who's gone to uni, or did you go to uni yourselves? Pop it into the chat. Um, so my final couple of years at University of Strathclyde was a 2-year project involving nanoscience. So what I really loved about this is you got to play with so much code. And now you're thinking, wait, you didn't do coding? No, I didn't. I had to teach myself. This was when I started. So it was a biophysics project, 2 years, and I got to play with those lovely ribbony things in the bottom right hand corner. That is a protein, and what's going on there is that each of those ribbony things is telling you a different direction for for what's known as a conformational change. So each of the proteins is held together in a certain way, and it was my job to see what we could do to the environment that would either stabilize them, make that better, or destabilize them, make it go a little bit funny. And one of the cool things about that process is that it can help us understand diseases. So diseases like Alzheimer's are part of protein degradation. So that happens when proteins become unstable, and then a little bit of an anomaly comes in, and they pick up on that anomaly and they replicate that instead. So if you can stop that process before it happens or understand why that happens, you can make huge leaps into preventing the disease. So, one thing I had to learn was Python and scripting. I was using supercomputers like that are in server racks that I don't have access to, which was so bizarre at the time. You log in on one computer and you're into another box. I just found it so cool. And I had to start using Linux, because even if I wanted to use Windows or another OS system, the server racks were Linux, so I had no choice. They wouldn't understand. They wouldn't understand my commands if I gave them to them in Windows language. They wouldn't understand. So I had to learn that. It was a really cool couple of years. And actually, during this time, I wanted to be a computational chemist. Reason for that is, see if you can get all this process right, and you can get that interaction correct, you can actually shave off about 5 to 10 years between time that medicine comes to the market, if you can get it right, which I just thought was so cool, and I wanted to help the world and all of that. But in order to do that, every single job that I looked at, or every single position, said you must have a PhD in a relevant field. So
A big
I
ask,
thought, okay.
Kelly.
I was up to the challenge. I was like, okay, cool. That sounds like fun. Why don't I search around for one of these things? So turns out that I wound up doing a PhD, same university, University of Strathclyde, but in chemical engineering. So I switched from a kind of biophysicsy type background to chemical engineering type background. But really, what I was doing was still physics, because my PhD was in computational modeling of light interactions with colloidal suspensions. Huge fancy words to mean want to shine light into a substance like a cough syrup or a cream, and you want to get back physical and chemical information from that subject, from that substance, right? And you want to be able to use that to better better like improve the manufacturing process. Because one of the annoying things that happens when you get high weight percentage substances like cough syrups and creams is that the usual type of um, analysis they do on it takes so much longer, because they have to take a little bit out of the batch, and then they've got to spin it around in a thing called a centrifuge to thin it out, and then they can then get back all that information. Because if you leave it as is, all this light scattering gets in the way and just interferes with the signals you actually want. So it's my job, basically, to code things up and to disentangle those signals, right? Using a really horrible long mathematics equation that no one wants to see. So we will leave it just at the skills I learned, which was yet more coding. So I taught myself C++ during this time, really learned Python, and got really into scripting, so that it would just run batch scripts as it went and just run a whole bunch of analysis on a bunch of data. Really learned physics. I really learned Linux at that point, because every machine I was using was Linux now, so that was cool. And tons and tons and tons of maths and physics. But one of the best parts about this experience was that I got to go all over the world and speak about my research in so many places. I got to go down to Bath, I got to go to Chester, all over the country. But the most cool conference I ever went to was in San Francisco back in 2017 at a huge international conference. Must have spoke about my research to a room of 150 plus people, which was so cool and yet so daunting at the same time. It was really great. But it was around this kind of time that I started to evaluate, like, what is it that I'm actually enjoying about this? And I started to realize, as much as I love the research and as much as I love the subject matter, I really enjoyed just coding for coding's sake. So, that led me to, okay, my PhD is about to end. I need to get a job. I want to be a software engineer, but like, what if I can't do it? Like, what if my experience doesn't count for much, or what if, oh, they need a certain degree or this or that? Um, I started to really wonder about these things.
There's a question
But
on that,
I
Kelly, as
really,
well. Did you feel nervous about it all?
oh yeah, oh yeah, no, I was shockingly nervous. I must have applied for like I don't know, 50 jobs before, coming into the graduate scheme here. But yeah, ultimately, as well, I thought there's more coding jobs, software jobs, than there is computational chemist positions. And computational chemist position would likely need yet more study and yet further things. And it was quite a specialist area. And because I was really enjoying just coding, I was like, well, that's going to be what I want to do. But I was a bit nervous and I was worried I wouldn't be able to pursue this career because I didn't really have any formal qualifications. Like I didn't even have equivalent of a GSCE or a standard grade in computing. So that was something that was quite, nerve-wracking for me. However, I did get through to the interview at Leidos, and I told the interviewer asked me a question, and it was in quite technical language, but I asked them to rephrase it because I just was upfront and saying I'm self-taught. I might not know the word for it, but I probably know what you're talking about. And to his credit, he rephrased it for me, and then I was able to answer it. And I just saw him nod away. And honestly, I think between having all that experience and being able to have the confidence to communicate in that way and the transferable skills I was able to show, I think that's really what got me the job here. Um, so yeah,
That takes you pretty
back
much
to you.
up to me, or we're at the same kind of place now.
Yeah.
Just like before
Yeah.
we launch into the kind of full-on Q&As, and there's definitely a couple of questions I want to pick up from the chat there. Just to give you like a quick recap. So Kelly and I have had two very different career paths towards our roles in technology and computing, and both of us have changed course a couple of times. For me, it's all all kicked off with a really creative background. Arts through into architecture, into engineering drafting within the energy sector, and then through into data and technology. And for Kelly,
Aye. And for me, it was always sort of maths and science at school, and then still continuing that thread, then discovering my love of coding, and now my job roles even switched since within the last year towards cloud and DevOps type work. I love learning, and I will try and learn everything I can. But yeah, my future is unwritten.
yeah, absolutely. And a winding road, I think, is probably the best way to describe it. What people might
Totally.
ask, and sometimes a question I've had before is, why so many changes in direction? Is it not just a waste of time learning something to then kind of move into a different area? And I've got a few examples just pulled together of some of the various skills and experiences that I picked up that I mentioned earlier when I was speaking about architecture that are still super useful for me today as a business analyst. And I guess it's that buzzword there, transferable skills. So I think probably folks have heard this either in career discussions or maybe at school, or maybe if you're in that sort of line of profession, you maybe used the expression transferable skills before. Um, but what does this actually mean in kind of context? Um, for me and Kelly, research skills is a big one. So using the most up to date data visualization tools for me, or CAD software, or analytics skills, and just being aware of all the different technology options that are available to help us remain competitive in industry.
Yeah, and being able to learn on your own, being that self-sufficient learner, and it's so important, and especially in today's really fast-paced workplace. Really important.
And then the design brief, which I mentioned a few times now. So wherever the customer's problem is with accessing or interpreting their data, or working with a tool or an app, or something software based, sometimes I have to work with the customers on their requirements gathering, so that we can figure out how to solve it either by adapting the processes or implementing a new or different technology. Which takes us neatly on to the application of technical knowledge as well. So using, in my case, often analytics tools to help our customers make decisions based on data available.
Yeah, and for me, it's usually I need to research what the thing they want is, write all that code, and then you need to be able to explain it to your team, the customer, and the users.
Yeah,
Get everyone on board.
a diverse group, of course. And then the visual graphic communication side of things, hopefully you can see in the right that my skills have improved slightly in the last 30 years. Um, and this one might seem kind of obvious for me, but like the likes of folks offshore who may be working in quite dangerous places need to be able to understand both the drawn information and the data that they're provided with. It could be that we're looking at escape routes, safe working areas, access points, structural loading. All of this needs to be as clear as possible and in the most appropriate format. And when I've got my research and development hat on, I need to be able to illustrate the potential impact of our innovation or our invention or idea in a way that both the technical communities and the non-technical people can understand. And sometimes that literally involves drawing cartoons to share with some of the folks from the business and some from the technical teams. And last quick example for us here as well is engaging multiple stakeholders. So, much like working in any built environment role, I have to manage multiple stakeholders' requirements. So, whether that be the project sponsor who's effectively funding our project, a software developer like Kelly, who might be building an app to support one of my customers' needs, or in fact the end user themselves, who may be in as I say, a dangerous position, say in the North Sea, and they need, to install a piece of equipment, and they need to make a decision based on data that I presented on a dashboard or something. And all these folks need to be able to carry out their work safely and efficiently. So it's really important, both for myself and Kelly, that we're able to work with multiple stakeholders and balance all their requirements. So yeah, giving away my age there slightly. The drawing skills have hopefully changed a little bit. So yeah, really just to reiterate, there's absolutely no wrong path to technology, but there probably are a few subjects you could pick up along the way to give you a bit of a leg up in that field. To where I am now, obviously I've come from very creative backgrounds, as I say, moved towards technology and data focus roles kind of more recently. And although my current role is very STEM focused, I'm looking at data, I still get to make use of my creative skills too, whether that be in design thinking or in visual communication, and these are really important to my role. And what's next? First, I'm going to say I used to be quite worried that having too many skills and interests might actually make it difficult for me to become a specialist and progress in any areas of my career path. But actually, what I found is the growth and then developing kind of a variety of skills can be really important and also really interesting. Like it keeps the work interesting if you're constantly picking up new skills. And I've just completed a nano degree in programming for data science. As I've discovered kind of through some of my recent projects in the research and development side, that actually the technical side of innovation and working with that data is something that I'm really passionate about. So, it's still it's still an evolution for me too.
Yeah, and for myself, currently in the cloud and DevOps space, but I'm really hoping to maintain hands-on development work as well. Would quite like to get into maybe some .NET projects at some point. Learn another language is always good. I would quite like to be a cloud architect. That's something I would like to aspire to. And yeah, I'm working towards all those things just now. But yeah, just there's no wrong path. But one thing I would personally say is if I did have computing or some formal knowledge of that under my belt a little bit sooner, it might have made things just a bit easier. Especially when talking to colleagues and they would say like a word that or a technical word that they would all share with each other, and I have to go and I'm googling frantically in the background to understand, oh, that's what that word means. Maybe if I had had that knowledge sooner, I would be better placed, but hey, it's all a learning curve. And just to wrap up, our interests are still evolving and so is technology.
Yeah, so there's always going to be room for development and growth and new jobs to come along, new roles that don't even exist yet are going to happen in the next few years. So it's a super exciting place to be. And actually, Kelly, just what you were wrapping up with there, there's that ties nicely into one of the questions that's come through, which was so not selecting computing at school or college doesn't block a career in IT. Based on what you've just said, would I be right in saying that for you, it wasn't a blocker, but it would have helped you?
Yeah, not a blocker, but it would have helped me. But it's
Yeah.
not a blocker at all. like I wouldn't worry, like say if it's if you're in the position of you're in secondary school and you think these subjects are the be all and end all. Don't worry about that. Pick what you enjoy, but like computing would have helped. But yeah, it wasn't a blocker. But yeah.
I think I agree in that from Kelly as well. In the obviously I mentioned I didn't take computing science, but if somebody was to ask me, what subjects would you recommend for the types of roles that I work in now, I would say that, and this ties back to one other questions I had, is that having something creative under your belt, whether that be in kind of the techie side of things, in graphic com, or whether that's in art. I think having something creative under your belt can be a big help, but I also think that having a subject, like I studied maths, but I think, and physics, those were the two kind of the science and technical side that I covered in my hires. But I think if I'd had something like business studies and computing science, that would have been like a nice rounded set of subjects to really, really bolster the role that I'm in just now. But I would just say, Kelly, it's one of those things where these would be fab to have, but if you're in a position where you've not chosen those yet, it's definitely not too late. You could pick it up at college, you could pick it up in further education, but also even in your career path itself, as we've proven, you can change direction a few times. So did anybody else have any
Definitely.
questions for us just now? I thought I saw somebody come off mute there. And I would say actually, yeah, if as we're on to like proper full-on Q&A, if anybody'd like to kick off some discussions or come off mute and ask questions, yeah, crack on. Equally, sticking it in the box, chat box is also fine. So we can pick up a couple. So,
Mhm. So I'll just answer one that I see here from the conference. Were there many women there at the conference? Yeah. One thing that I found during sort of science conferences and things in general, there were there was quite a lot of women there. And actually, it was interesting. At this conference, they had a seminar on unconscious bias, which was really cool. Really cool. That was my sort of first experience of that actually, and it was really, really. It was they did the standard question of they would talk about the son and that they get a phone call and then it turns out that the wife's the doctor scenario. But it was really cool for me because I'd never really heard of all of that stuff before, and it was interesting to learn about. So yeah, they've certainly had a strong sort of view towards the sort of unconscious bias training and yeah, that sort of stuff. But yeah, lots of women I'd seen. However, I will caveat that with it was 2017 and it was in America, and President Trump's travel ban had just come in, so many speakers were cancelled.
oh, that's a shame. Definitely a shame. Um, Another question. Ah, this is a really good question, actually. So, when do you think it's too late to change to a career in tech? I'll maybe go first in that, Kelly, and then you can follow up too.
Hmm.
I think for me, I would say it's never too late. Would be my immediate reaction to that. I mean, changing and upskilling to a completely new area if you've got kind of no experience in that, it's never going to be like a really easy thing to do. But if you're fortunate, I would say I'm quite lucky in that I work for at Leidos. We've got some really supportive training and development teams and managers that are keen to upskill. So I've been able to take advantage of that a little bit, and then that's where my nano degree from programming data science has come in. It's been part of one of our kind of upskilling initiatives. Specifically, we've got a couple that are running for getting women into more analytics and AI ML type roles, which is fantastic. So if you're working for the right sort of company, fantastic. And there's loads of initiatives across Scotland as well with various charities and organisations that will help people who are either maybe returning to work or looking for a career change. So I think if it's something you really want to do, then it's absolutely never too late. What's your take, Kelly?
Yeah, I'd agree. It's never too late. It's never too late. Yeah, you just need to, like Kirsty says, just basically make sure you got the resources there to upskill, and you'll be fine.
Yeah, definitely that. Question about if anyone on the call is interested in coding, is there anywhere you can go for some resources or coding practice? We have got like a short list. I don't know if it's on the end of the slide deck, but we have got a short list of some resources that are really good for free technical coding. And also, if you back into the Ada Scott Fest page, I think in our event, we've got a note of under the Leidos piece about a resource that we developed for National Coding Week. So that's gives a good kind of introduction to some coding and links out to some good resources. So hit up the Ada Fest page and look for Leidos in there and you'll find something.
I would say that for beginners, which areas things would be best to start with, I would say I personally really like Python as a learner language. It's really
That,
good.
someone who's just learned it or learning it.
It's quite a forgiving language, and it's really good to teach you the basics and to teach you the basics of the logic and things that need to be involved for coding. And it's super powerful as well. So it's not like it's not like you can't do things with it. It's fantastic. I that's the first one I learned, and I swear by it. It's really good.
Yeah, and I would say actually as a further point, thanks Sarah, she's dropped the link into our page where we've got that almost like a beginner's guide to coding type interactive booklet. So that's probably a really good place for absolute beginners, and there's some really good resources in there. Also, you'll see myself and Kelly have our LinkedIn details up there on the page just now as well. So if you want to add us on LinkedIn, I'm more than happy to share resources that way too. I think for me on the beginners front, as somebody who's been a bit of a career changer rather than somebody who's learning kind of at school level and some of these things, I think because I have an interest in languages in general, so like as in communicating with people in French, for example, I really love languages and I love patterns and I like order and logic. And I think that's why I found I've done a bit of work in like SQL and I've done work in Python, and I find that Python feels more natural. Um, so I would recommend that if you're into that kind of logic side of things, approaching it with that outlook is quite a good way to go about it. Um, oh yeah, I see we're actually coming to the end of the call. So
Yeah.
thanks again to Ada Scotland Festival for having us along. I'll maybe just quickly ask if are there any young folks on the call who haven't had a chance to ask any questions yet, or equally if there's anybody on the call who is from more of an educational background or parent and wants to ask anything. Give it the last wee minute for a question to come through, and then we can wrap up the call. I think that might be us then for today, just in the last minute. Are there any other questions we've missed from earlier on? I'm just going to quick look up. So here's an interesting one, what we missed earlier. So if you don't have a strong math skills, could you still have a career in IT? I'm going to say yes to that because I honestly was rubbish at maths at school. But I worked really hard on it, and I did actually manage to get a reasonable grade, but it definitely wasn't my strength because I think it was the way it was taught at school for me just didn't chime well with the way I like to learn. I like to understand but why, and the level that maths you go into at school doesn't give me enough of the but why in order to understand it. So I struggled with it a wee bit. But funnily enough, coming from somebody who didn't do well at maths at school, I basically now live in data. So, yes, it's absolutely possible.
Yeah, I think I was quite lucky. Because I was able to have like quite a good teacher at school for maths who was able to go into the but why, and we were doing advanced higher maths when I was in my third year at school because we
Yeah,
were
that's
the
definitely
advanced class.
that
So we were doing that. So we basically got like we basically just had a couple of years of revision for higher and my at the time when I did it standard grades. So it was great. But I was lucky.
pretty good going, I would say. Cool. So that's us.
Yeah, I was lucky.
time now for the session. Thanks everyone for your questions as well. It makes our life a little bit easier if you guys are engaged. So thanks very much for your questions so far today. And as I say, our LinkedIn details are up there on the screen. So if anybody would like any other information or links out to resources, please just give us a shout via LinkedIn. I'm happy to share. And you'll find some more information about Leidos on the ADA Scotland Festival page as well. So thanks very much, folks.
Thank you both.
Thanks, everyone.
Take care.
Take care, everyone. Bye-bye.
Just want to say thank you, guys. I don't know if you're still there. I'm kind of managing 2 calls at once, but thank you so much.